All right, we are live. Welcome to another episode of At Home with Mark. I am very pumped today because I have been following this gentleman on YouTube and elsewhere, socials, all over the socials, as the kids say. But Mr. RJ Ronquillo is here today. So thank you so much for hanging out, buddy. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Mark. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, man. So it's funny, guys. We were just talking pre-live and we started going into stuff. We're like, I gotta shut up. But the first thing I usually start with, RJ, is just like, I have a moment in my life that was like totally changed the game and made me like want to pursue guitar and music in general. Like, as kids, I don't know if you grew up playing in the school band. I played trumpet and stuff. That wasn't doing it for me.
Yeah.
But then I heard Pearl Jam's 10, and that made me want to learn guitar. Do you have any moments in life that you can kind of pinpoint to like
Yeah,
that?
absolutely. So my first kind of musical experience was my parents made me and my sister take piano lessons. I was 6, my sister was 8, and it was cool. It wasn't something that I wanted to do, but it was interesting to me. So I learned how to read music and everything and play some stuff, but it wasn't until the movie Back to the Future came out that I saw how cool guitar was and skateboarding. So that and I hear the story with so many people that are in our age group is Back to the Future was kind of the pivotal moment where we saw guitar on the screen and we're like, oh, that's cool. I want to start playing guitar. So
Mhm.
Marty McFly was my first guitar hero.
Nice. So did that like lead you into like looking up stuff like Chuck Berry and like
Yep.
finding out?
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah.
so tell me about that. Like, so once you got
So
into it, what were you doing?
so before that, before Back to the Future, I think I was probably listening to whatever's on the radio, probably like a lot of Michael Jackson, Hall and Oates stuff or whatever. And then, my parents had records around the house, so I listened to some oldies stuff. I was familiar with the Beatles. I was familiar with that stuff. And then when Back to the Future came out and Chuck Berry was featured, Johnny B. Good was featured, as well as like a little snippet of Eddie Van Halen in there, that was like what I grew up on. So I started listening to more um, vintage rock, kind of early rock and roll, Chuck
Mm.
Berry, Little Richard, Jerry Lee Lewis, Elvis, and all that stuff. And then I gradually started listening decade by decade. So started with 50s rock and roll, 60s rock and roll. At the same time, it was the 80s. So I was kind of digesting everything, current 80s radio and MTV, plus, Beach Boys, and then Clapton. Clapton was probably my second biggest influence after Chuck Berry and Marty McFly.
Nice. That's funny. So you're the second person. So Jason Shadrick was on here a couple weeks ago, and you guys are the only ones so far that have cited Clapton, which is really interesting because, I mean, when I was growing up, for some reason, I didn't get into Clapton until much later, like
Mhm.
way later. Like it was all for me. And I wasn't like an Eddie Van Halen. My best friend was a huge Van Halen fan. But like the Seattle stuff was what got me into guitar.
Yeah.
And then that transitions to like through Pantera, through like all this other heavy stuff into like, and then I have older siblings into like jam bands like the Grateful Dead and Fish. And that's kind of
Right.
where I went into that and into funk music and all that. But like, it's interesting because so many people like Clapton is such an icon, but
Well, here's the thing about getting into Clapton at that time period. People don't remember, or you don't realize that Clapton was still relevant in the 80s, in the 90s. He was on MTV. He had music videos and winning awards, and so when you see Clapton on TV, you're like, "Oh, cool, guitar player." And then you discover his history with, John Mayall and Cream and all that stuff. So you're like, "Oh, wow, he's currently on MTV, but he had all this cool vintage rock and roll stuff." And plus, he had a good PR person. He had good management. He was getting sponsored in ads with all this stuff. Um, I remember he put out his box set probably somewhere around 1988, 89, the Crossroads box set. I had 2 copies of those.
yeah.
Um, so he was kind of big at that time. all through the 90s and his unplugged thing. So
Mhm.
um I got into actually I saw my one of my first concerts was seeing Clapton
Mm.
live in an arena with like Phil Collins on drum. No, it wasn't Phil Collins. It was Steve Ferrone but Nathan East and
Oh.
Greg Gaines and everybody. Mark Knopfler was playing second guitar. It was amazing.
What?
So yeah, so we think of Clapton as being like, oh, he's the king of British blues and cream, but he was also an 80s pop star.
Yeah. No, for sure. It's crazy to think about that, but also to think about I've probably learned about a bunch of musicians through Clapton, through cats playing in Clapton's band, like Bramhall, like Doyle.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
I had no clue about Doyle until I saw, like, some Crossroads festival. I was like, "Who is that guitar player?" Not only because of his mystique, but, dude was just such a great player whenever he threw it to him. So it's
Yes.
interesting 'cause Clapton seems so generous in that way, you know what I mean? Like, he doesn't seem even though he's this icon, he doesn't seem like he's got this ego that he needs to hold on to. Like, he's already done that. Like, he's like, I'm good, man." Like,
I think he genuinely wants to just play with great musicians.
yeah, yeah. When you first got into him, you talk about, like, the old, like, Mayall and stuff like that. Like, were you hip to that stuff, like, immediately, or did you have to go down, like, a winding trail to get to it?
Well, like I said, when his box set came out, I ate that stuff up. It was basically his historical record of all his major work from, the earliest stuff to the current stuff. So I listened to, I think it was like 4 cassettes, and, I listened to all of them. I mean,
Nice.
I preferred probably the first 2, like the early stuff,
Mhm,
and I didn't get into the '70s stuff until much later, but yeah, I
mhm.
mean, Cream was probably the biggest one to me. Just
Okay.
'cause that playing during those Cream years and everything.
What are the tapes that you wore out working on changes and trying to figure songs out? Do you remember anything like that?
Oh gosh. Back then, uh, definitely Van Halen 1. Um, man, it's funny. I don't know if you remember, if anyone else remembers, but back in the day, they used to have these like Time magazine, Time Life magazine, or they
I
used to have
don't
these
remember that.
compilation they used to sell these compilation, albums on TV. Like, they had Sounds of the '70s,
Oh, yeah,
and,
yeah,
like,
yeah,
there
yeah,
was, Freedom Rock, which was another company, and it was just like a compilation of '60s music and '70s music, and I remember I bought some of those, and, the first song I actually learned on my own was Black Magic Woman, Santana's version. So, I was just whatever was on those tapes and records and on the radio, on the classic rock radio, that was kinda like what I listened to a lot. Probably more
okay.
than the current music that was coming out at the time.
Mhm. So it's cool, like, that you got into something as sophisticated as Van Halen 1 that early on. Did you find that you were picking up that stuff quickly on the instrument? Did you find like you were,
No.
like, banging your head against the wall? Like, 'cause I mean, you seem like such a natural player, like, you have such a natural way of communicating with the instrument when I
That
watch you play.
Thank you. That took a I mean, obviously, that took me a while to figure out, but, I had bought Van Halen 1, but I couldn't play any of that stuff.
Mhm.
At that time when I bought Van Halen 1, we were already in the Van Hagar era. So I was
Okay.
listening to, the 5150 album and the OU812 album, as well as, the very first Van Halen record, trying to catch up and learn where he came from. But, yeah, I literally just bought this on Amazon, like, a couple days ago just so I
Oh,
can. And
yes.
the funny thing is, like, I had this growing up, this exact same edition. It's kinda beat up, but, the, transcription to Eruption is totally wrong. It's totally
Of
wrong.
course.
It was, the tapping part's on the 3rd string. I'm like, "Nope, that's not right."
Oh,
But
man. That's funny.
but,
Man,
yeah, I'm still learning that stuff right to this day.
yeah. So that must have been pretty a big blow the other day, huh, when you found
Oh,
out the news?
absolutely.
Yeah.
It's still hard to process, but, I mean, you know, he's kind of for our generation at least, he was like the first guitar hero that was, out there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I saw, did you see that old interview with, I think it was it Kurt Loder going through his studio with him,
yeah.
and I didn't I it's the first time I'd seen that the other night, and I was like, man, he seemed like he was just, you know, substance abuse aside or whatever was going on in that dude's life and all the stuff that he went through. He seemed like he was just genuinely really jazzed about music, which, regardless of his fame and however big he got, he seemed like he was just always writing and always wanting to push the envelope a bit. Like, that's something that I appreciate. Even though I didn't get into Van Halen until, what was that? Was the that VHS tape with like the Jesus on the front lawn? It was probably like the
Oh,
Right Now era of
yeah,
Hagar.
yeah. It was the live record with Sammy, and
Yeah, that
they
was
did it.
my entrance
Yeah.
that my buddy, like, gave me, and, I told this story. I was talking to Ariel Posen a couple weeks ago about this, but, like, we went to see Van Halen, at a venue around Baltimore, and Our Lady Peace was opening up for them,
Hmm.
and I went to see Our Lady Peace, and my buddies were there. I was like, "Bro, we gotta get there early because the opening band's great," and they're like, "What are you talking about, man? We can show up late." Like, "No,
Yeah.
no, no, no." But, yeah, he just seemed like such a genuine music lover, you
Yeah.
know?
Well, he was like a genius. I mean, the stuff that he came up with, and he'd say in interviews, he played that way because that's all he knew, you
Mhm.
know,
Yeah,
which is a sign of a genius.
yeah. I love his quote too about when they were talking about, music education and everything about, like, it's music theory, not music fact.
Mhm.
And I
Yeah.
think that if I that'll stick with me forever now, but, like, he was like, "If I had been trained classically or whatever, I might have never created the things that I've created because I was just trying things out," you know?
Yeah.
That was the most brilliant. I mean, when I heard that the other night, I was like, "Wow. Yeah, right on."
Yeah, it's also the time period that they came up in at the late '70s. There wasn't really, I mean, you can't really hear any influences on those records. It's not like a direct, blues reference or anything. Like they always said that they had to compete with disco and, whatever, R&B or something. So
Can you imagine that?
they
Like,
basically created, modern rock, you know, that, American modern rock, I guess.
yeah, it's crazy. Alright, so you're in that headspace. So how old are you at that point?
Like 12-ish,
Okay.
12.
So
I've been playing, so I started playing guitar around 10 years old,
okay,
9, 10.
okay. Which is same with me. I think right around that area, like 6th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade kinda
Mhm.
thing.
Yeah.
So you're transitioning into high school at that point. So what happens then as far as musical
So
taste and everything?
actually, I really got into guitar playing when I was 12 or 12 or 13, right before I went into high school. And actually, when I was 13, I took jazz guitar lessons, with a local teacher in Detroit, and I don't know why. I just wanted to do something new. You know, I wasn't, by no means, I wasn't an expert at rock or blues music. I just wanted to kind of try different things. I think maybe I heard some jazz guitar on the radio, or I probably, actually, I did have a cassette that was like a jazz guitar compilation. Like, "Oh, that sounds interesting." But, I have no idea how to learn it, so I had to get a teacher, and there was a nice kind of, music school, um, downtown Detroit. I don't think it exists anymore, but, I started taking jazz guitar lessons, when I was 13, so by the time I entered high school, I kinda knew how to play a little bit of stuff. But the cool thing about the high school I went to was freshman year, my very first class in the morning was Introduction to Jazz Improvisation. And I went to
Mm.
a public high school in, like, Metro Detroit, and I'm like, "That's cool." It wasn't like Fame, it wasn't, an arts high school whatsoever, but for some reason, they offered this, class, and, that's actually where I met Tim Miller.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah.
So were you playing guitar in that? Was like an ensemble type of thing, or was it just
Yeah,
like a history?
it was a super loose class, but it was basically, there were drummers, bass players, guitarists, I don't even think there was horn players. I think there was like one piano player, but we I feel like they taught us the basics of like jazz harmony and like modes and stuff,
Mhm.
but really we were only there so we could just play music.
Right,
and,
that's
and
awesome.
I don't remember learning that much in the class, but I did get to play with other musicians trying to play jazz music for
Right,
the
and
first time, which
it
I never did.
got, like, the 4 polytone, amps lined up to get that nice.
I think it was Peavey stuff. I remember it
Oh,
was
nice.
Peavey stuff. And um we did like really basic, you know, blues changes and like Satin Doll or something,
Nice.
kinda like
Right,
the easiest standards you could. But I mean, the benefit of that was obviously meeting these other musicians at school and getting to play with them.
and then did you kind of amongst that group, did you kinda put bands together and kind of amalgamate?
Yeah, so my best friend, who's still my best friend today, we played bass in bands. He played bass in our in the band we had from like, gosh, probably 5th grade when we first started playing instruments. Pretty much through high school, we were playing in bands together. So him and I were both in the class together. So I knew him. Um, and there was a Swedish exchange student. I can't remember his name, but he was a really good drummer, and we actually got him to be in our band that freshman year of high school, and, yeah, and the other guys were pretty much upperclassmen and stuff.
Nice. Alright, so what was the band name in 5th grade?
Uh, I think it was called LRL, so it was Lawrence, which was the bass player, me, RJ, and then our drummer's name was Larry. I think we
That's
called it LRL.
so much cooler than my middle school band name. So much cooler. That's, like, a way ahead of your time cool.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well,
man.
we became then it turned into another band called The Plague for junior high.
There you go. Yeah, that's more my speed. We were ominous. I remember, did you ever when you were a kid, did you ever, like, make fake tape labels for your
Oh, all the
band and, like
time,
oh, man, I miss those
even in
days.
high school.
Yeah, dude, I miss those days so much. Um, so then post high school, we were talking before, so music school, college.
Yeah, that didn't happen right out of high school.
Oh, okay.
So, after I graduated high school, I was considering going to music school, but, I wasn't sure yet, and I feel like trying to remember, this was so long ago. I feel like I had actually visited, music school, University of Miami, but I got scared off because you had to audition to get placed, and I took that as being like, "Oh my god, if I audition and I don't make it, then I won't get in," and it scared the heck out of me. So
Mhm.
I decided to just go to a basic liberal arts school to get my feet wet with the college, experience. So I went to a school in St. Augustine, Florida, northern Florida, which is like right south of Jacksonville.
Mhm.
And just didn't really have a major, just kind of I didn't party, but I partied. I just kinda, I did the college thing, and then halfway in the middle of the year, I'm like, "This is lame. Let me do it for real." So, went back down to Miami, um, did another tour, and then eventually went back and auditioned, and I auditioned as a, um, music engineering major with a guitar focus or whatever. Because
Mhm.
when you're a music engineering major, you still have to do instrument classes and ensembles and stuff. So and plus, the word engineering was more attractive to my parents than just jazz music.
Yeah, yeah, that's great.
So, I auditioned, and I felt that because I wasn't a going in as a jazz major, that they were more lenient with your audition because you were just going in as engineering. So, little did I know that they were still pretty hardcore about your performance and your playing, even though you're an engineering major. So, second year of college, I transferred to Miami as a music engineering major. Got through the first semester, and I hated it.
Hmm. Why?
Partly because when you at the time when you're a music engineering major, you not only have to take your engineering classes, like calculus and all the science stuff, but you also have to do the same classes that the jazz majors take, which is gosh, like musicology classes, your private lessons, um, some kind of theory, music theory, sight singing, all this stuff.
Mm,
And to balance those two worlds was, you know, way too much for me.
yeah.
And here I am trying to be creative, and then on another day I have to learn C++ programming and all this stuff, and it was just like too much. And basically I was also getting jealous of my friends that were in the jazz program, that they got to play guitar all day and play in all these ensembles all the time, and they had a lighter class load as well.
Mm,
So I decided to change my major, which I had to re-audition again for the same
mm.
people, which wasn't a big deal. It was like whatever. They know how to they know how I play because I've auditioned before for them.
Do you
And
remember what
my
you did in those auditions? Like, did you have to bring a prepared piece or anything?
probably I had to play like a solo jazz guitar piece and then improvise over something, and then I think they would quiz you on like play a whole tone scale and all this diminished, half diminished scale and all this stuff.
Mhm.
But I prepared that second time for sure.
Nice.
And so I got accepted into the program. And then the following year, I was a jazz performance major. So I was on the 5-year plan for college.
Amen, brother. Amen. I
Yeah.
know that very well. So then from there, when you left, did you go right to Nashville? Like, where did you go from
No,
there?
I stayed. I stayed in South Florida because I didn't know where else to go. But the funny thing is, my spring break of my senior year in college, I actually visited Nashville because I was amped on moving here to
Mhm.
Nashville. This would have been like 1999, and country music was getting huge. You had, you know, gosh, Tim McGraw and Shania Twain, and it was becoming pop music basically.
Mhm.
And I was dialed into, the whole studio scene, like Brent Mason and Dan Huff, and
Mm.
the songwriting scene and all that stuff. And I was really, pretty much, I was going to move right after college, but I came here and I got scared because I get scared a lot in life. No, I got scared
We all
because
do.
I've told this story before. I went to Corner Music because I wanted to buy an acoustic guitar, and all the people, all the customers there were burning players. They were like playing Chet Atkins stuff, and like they looked like Joe Schmo, or like a doctor or a lawyer, and I'm like, these guys are like regular dudes off the street playing this, good. I can't even imagine what the professional guitar players, were like. So I was like, maybe I'll wait. I'm not that, enthused about country music just yet. So I didn't move to Nashville. I ended up staying in South Florida pretty much right after I graduated, and it took a while to actually become a real professional musician
Mm.
right after college. But I knew that. I knew that after graduation, because like when you graduate with a degree in jazz guitar performance, you either go back to get your master's
Mhm.
and become a teacher and get your doctorate and become a teacher, or um, do other stuff. And yeah, I had basically had a day job selling cell phones right out of college. Not right out of college, but like a little bit after college. And it was a gradual progress to find work as a musician, but I did find it eventually.
That's awesome. Did you at the time, were you doing weekend warrior stuff? Were you doing gigs on the weekends, on the weeknights, or
Yeah, so I eventually fell into the cover band stuff and wedding band situations. So it got pretty good where that was where I was able to quit my day job and just do gigging. So I would probably gig 3 or 4 nights a week, sometimes doubles.
Mhm.
Um, and it paid decent. It paid fine. Um, but But after a while, it kind of, he gets tired of doing that stuff and late nights and whatnot.
Yeah. So then what year did you actually make the move up to Nashville?
Well, it doesn't stop there, Mark.
Oh, keep it going then. I want to hear this.
So, I mean, I lived in South Florida. Gosh, I think so. I graduated in '99. I didn't move until 2008, right? 2008. So I stuck around for a little bit, and while I was doing the cover band stuff, I eventually got introduced to other people, and I started touring, getting some touring gigs out of Miami and stuff. So the first thing I did was a reggae band called Inner Circle. So we toured. I toured with them, States, Europe, Brazil. So that was awesome.
Mm.
And it kind of picked up from there. I started getting other I started getting session work through them. So there's the Inner Circle actually has a really nice studio in North Miami called Circle House Studios, and a lot of artists and producers would come through there, and the band would come and invite me and say, "Hey, just hang out. Some of these producers want guitar players to play on their stuff." So I would just hang out at the house, at the studio, which was made up of like 3 or 4 different studios. Um, and eventually I met producers and got on a couple tracks, and um, s that was kinda short-lived, my session career in
Mm.
Miami, but I got to play on a couple of fun things. Um, and then I got some more touring work as well with, Latin artists, um, and because, Miami, South Florida, the biggest, markets are, Latin music, and at the time, like, hip hop and R&B,
Yeah.
and world music as well, but there wasn't, like, a lot of rock or pop in English stuff happening, so it was kinda limiting,
Yeah.
and, um and after I did all that stuff, I ended up actually moving to LA for a couple years, and, basically, I moved to LA because I wanted to get away from those markets, those scenes. I wanted to do, like, more rock stuff and more pop stuff,
Mhm.
um, but the funny thing is, like, I moved to LA and I was still getting hired for tours out of Miami, so I was still doing Latin stuff, while I was living in LA.
Oh
I
man.
couldn't get away, but, I lived in LA for a little bit, I think 6 years, and then got, asked to audition for a country group here in Nashville, and, I started playing with them, and I actually moved from LA to Chicago.
Mm.
Long story short there was we were already planning on leaving LA, and we already plans to move back to Chicago. My wife and I are both from the Midwest, Michigan,
Mhm.
and we had family and friends in Chicago. So moved up to Chicago, but I took the gig here in Nashville because the proximity was pretty close. Chicago to Nashville is like a 45-minute flight or, an 8-hour drive. So like
Mhm.
I'll pay rent in Chicago, but I'll work in Nashville. So I did that for a year, continued touring with this group, Thompson Square, and eventually just decided to move here. And that's how
Man.
I got to Nashville.
Man, that's crazy. So when you were in LA, like, how long did it take you a minute to, like, break in? Were you doing session stuff there?
Mm, it was very limited. And anyone that's lived in LA and tried to break into the session work scene, even here in Nashville too, it's like you don't really get session work unless someone retires or passes out, passes away or something,
Right.
So, um, I mean, I did some cool things in LA, um, but it's kind of really hard to succeed in LA as a musician. Um, there's a lot of opportunity, but there's also a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah. It's weird because you see a lot of celebrities like Joe Rogan and people like that are leaving LA, like, just like, "This it's getting crazy here.
Yeah,
Like, I don't wanna be here anymore," and I imagine there's probably, like, look at Robin Ford. Now he's in
yeah.
your neck of the woods, man. So it's like, he used to be out there, now he's, like, in Nashville. I feel like Nashville is becoming the new LA, and it probably
Well,
already
yeah,
is,
it
you
it
know?
yeah, I think it is already. I think a
Mhm.
lot of people are already talking about moving out, but um, there was definitely a time right after we moved here in 2015 officially, and within that next couple to year or 2, everyone was moving. I knew multiple people from LA that were buying houses here and,
Mhm.
um, buying property and building studios here and everything, so a lot
Yeah.
of it was the cost of living was much cheaper in Nashville than most of LA.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure. So then did you like how soon did the YouTube thing start to kinda take hold? Like from when you got there?
So the YouTube thing started, I think, when I was in LA, kinda towards the end of my tenure in LA. I started, getting hired by this company, Eastwood Guitars, to make videos, and initially, I made my first video because I wanted to get a guitar at a discount. Excuse me. And, so I said, "Hey, if I can get artist pricing on this guitar," which I still have, um, I'll do a video for you for this thing called YouTube. So this was I wanna say it was around 2009, 2010. Um,
It was just a baby then,
it was
man.
just a baby. I think, I started my account in 2006, and I didn't really put up videos, but 2009, 2010, I was watching Pete Thorne and what's his name?
Marty Schwartz?
No,
He
actually,
was
I didn't discover Marty until later.
Mhm.
Um, this Austin guy, um, what's his name?
Hmm.
Austin guitar player. He was, playing for a retail store. Lance Keltner. No,
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Lance
Yeah, yeah, you're right.
Lance
Yeah.
Keltner, is that his name?
Mhm. Yep, totally, dude.
Those are my earliest memories of watching guitar YouTube videos.
Mhm.
So, I started doing work just gear demo work for them. Eventually, more companies, more pedal companies, amp companies, um, and basically, while I was touring with Thompson Square with the Nashville band, I was still doing the gear demo stuff, on my off time or whenever I was home. So it was nice. It was a nice little, you know, extra spending money.
Mhm.
Um, and then at some point while I was playing with Thompson Square, I decided to make a vlog video because I was getting into these other YouTubers like Casey Neistat and Pete McKinnon and kind of the artistic way of filming videos. And I said, I want to try it just to see if I could challenge myself with, camera gear and, camera angles and editing and all that stuff. So I did a tour vlog of what it's like being a Nashville touring musician. And I wouldn't say it blew up, but it actually, it got more views than a typical guitar demo video, and I'm like, "Oh, this is kind of interesting. Maybe I should try doing other things besides just gear demo videos."
Yeah.
So, I eventually started putting other content, up whenever I had time, like guitar lesson stuff or other type of gear related videos, and, I had, kinda gotten tired of touring and traveling, so I had toured with Thompson Square for about 5 years, and towards the end, I was thinking about doing something else besides touring, and this YouTube thing started getting busier and busier and coming up, and I knew at the time that if I could devote 100% of my time to YouTube, that I would be able to sustain myself because I knew there was companies that were wanting to send me gear and to do demos for, but I would have to tell them, "Look, I'm gonna be out for a couple weeks, so you're gonna have to, send it to me later or I can't do it or something."
Wow.
So I
Yeah.
knew that I was gonna be okay if I, just dropped the whole touring situation and just did YouTube. But it was scary at first because, going from a full-time job as a touring musician and that steady work and steady pay and jumping into something kind of unknown like,
Mhm.
doing video stuff. It was kinda scary, but I waited until I was completely convinced that it would work.
That's great. You're like my benchmark as far as, like, when I 'cause I started doing this seriously, when I was like, I'm gonna try to start putting some content up just to see if I can get some subscribers and stuff. And probably in February.
Yeah.
And it's steadily growing. And I know Mike was like telling me, Mike Palmisano was like, you just got to keep doing it, be consistent every week. You have great content, so that's going to be fine. You'll find your audience. And he's like, and there's plenty of room for all of us to be out here doing this.
Oh yeah.
Because we're all different, and some people are going to be attracted to different things. But like anytime I watch your videos, I'm like, man, I got to figure out what RJ does with all like with his cameras and stuff. Because I have very limited gear right now. I'll have to talk to you about it another time, but about like what you think I should be using to shoot video, because I love the way you have stuff set up.
Thank you.
It's always cool.
It's something that I've had to learn too. I mean, most of my job is actually being a videographer and video editing more than actual being a musician. It's kind of funny.
I believe.
So, learning the skills of how to work a camera, how to choose lenses and lighting and video editing, that's something that I had to learn on my own. And I learned it as I went. And obviously I learned from other people's YouTube videos and YouTube tutorials on how to work all this camera gear stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like I had to, take a course or read a book or something. It's something I'm genuinely interested in already, like
Mm-hmm.
the whole video editing thing, because it's another way for me to be artistic and another outlet for me to be artistic. But that's not music related. So, um, like I love learning about, camera gear and how to be more cinematic and all that stuff, because it's totally different than the music thing. And I need something else like that to
Yeah,
keep me happy.
that's awesome. Are you using Final Cut? What are you using to put
Yeah.
everything together? Okay,
So
cool.
I use Final Cut just because that's all I know.
Me too.
I've been a Mac user um, forever, even though I don't use an iPhone. I use Mac for all my stuff. So I use Logic as my audio recording, and I use Final Cut for my video editing, and it's easy. I have no
Yeah.
problems.
If it ain't broke, man,
Yeah.
you know. Did you ever think when you were starting this, did you ever think, I see your guitar hanging behind you? Did you ever think you'd have some signature guitars or like pedals? Like, were you, I mean, it's gotta be a really cool, like the little kid in you is like, oh man, this is dope kind of
Yeah.
thing. Like,
Well,
like
it's funny. Like obviously, when I was a little kid, I was like, yeah, I would love to have a ton of guitars and a signature guitar and endorsements and stuff. But as a professional musician, I don't think having a signature anything came to mind. Mainly because I didn't know what I was like. I didn't have my own style. Being a professional musician for so many years, when you play in cover bands and play for different artists as a side man or whatever, um, you're basically playing other people's style. You're not in a rock band. You're not Eddie Van Halen. You're not developing your own thing.
mm-hmm.
So for many years, I was just like, I'll just play whatever you guys want me to play, and that's it. I didn't have my own personality as a guitar player. So, the idea of being a guitar personality wasn't even in my mind. So probably a couple of years ago, I started getting more into like, what's my style? How do I want to be known as a guitar player or whatever? What's basically my guitar personality? So I kind of worked on that just a couple of years ago and figured stuff out. Basically, trying to get away from being the sideman guitar player with no, you know, distinct personality musically, and coming up with my own thing,
That's
which I
cool, man.
still don't even know what it is, but anyways, that's a pink and teal guitar.
Yeah, it's awesome. I think you probably are the person that introduced me to Novo. I mean, I knew about Fano before Novo became a
Sure.
thing because I saw, I think Chuck Garvey from the band Mo was playing them, and I always thought they were really cool because they
Mhm.
were different. They weren't a Strat, they weren't a Les Paul, whatever. They had their own personality. But you probably were the first video I saw of those guitars. Talk a little bit about that, because you do have so many guitars and you probably use them all in different contexts. But talk a little bit about that relationship, and because you and Rhett
Yeah.
are the main dudes that I see playing those.
Yeah, technically, I think Rhett knew about Novo before me, before everybody. But I was introduced to Novo. Um, I feel like we had just moved to Nashville. Uh, Dennis and the guys actually moved down to Nashville around that same time, 2015, 2016 era, I think. So they were new, and they were actually sharing a space with Eastwood Guitars. So I already had that relationship with Eastwood, and I think initially they were sharing this space. It was going to be basically the Novo Guitars shop, and then kind of storage or like shipping for the Eastwood Guitars, which is it's a Canadian company if anyone doesn't know. But they wanted to have like kind of a place to ship from. They had some place in Chicago that they ship from now, but for a while they were taking orders and shipping out of the Nashville location because it's really central and it's easy to
Oh
ship
yeah.
stuff out of. So they were sharing the space, and when they had their grand opening of the warehouse and the shop, I went over there. I got to meet Dennis. I got to meet all the people there. So I was over there a lot. Eastwood and Novo have their shared line Revolta.
Mm-hmm.
So for the longest time, you would go to their shop and they would have Novo guitars, Revolta guitars, and Eastwood guitars. So it was kind of like my home base. And to tell you the truth, when I first learned about Novo guitars and saw Novo guitars, I wasn't into them. Like I didn't think they were as attractive as I think they are now.
Right.
They were too weird. Like the shapes were too unconventional. I was, traditional. I like Strats and Tellys and Les Pauls, but so
Yeah.
the shape was like, well, that's kind of big and crazy looking.
Mm-hmm.
And so it took me a while to warm up to the design and the shape, but I think a lot of it had to do I would go over to their showroom and play all the guitars and be like, man, these Novos, all of them play exceptionally well, and they're built, perfectly, which, it's kind of hard to find these days. And
Yeah, man.
yeah, so I was very impressed with the workmanship as well as the sound, as well as the people that work there, and the time and the talents that they have to build these guitars. They're really, there's nothing like them.
Yeah, it's you can tell that the people that work there really love what they're doing.
Yeah.
It
And
comes across.
yeah, and it took me a while to decide on what kind of style I wanted. So I played through a bunch of them,
Mm-hmm. Okay.
and
Is
they
it
all sound
does it
great.
feel comfortable now? Because for me, like offset guitars always make me feel weird. Like
Yeah.
I want to love a Jazz Master. I really do. I really want to love it. But every time I pick one up, I'm just like, it's just not comfortable. I don't know what it is about it.
It's definitely a different guitar. Compare it you can't compare like an offset style guitar to anything else. You can't compare it to like a Les Paul or a Strat or a Tele. There's something about the it's not the scale length, but the distance between the bridge and everything, and it has this it's a tighter feeling guitar. It resonates a little bit differently.
Mm-hmm.
Um it rings out a little bit differently. It's something that you have to get comfortable to. I
Okay.
mean, before my Novo, I played Jazz Masters, and I owned a Jaguar, um, and at the time I was like, "Yeah, it's not my thing. It's kinda feels weird." But you then I, figured out that you just gotta accept how it feels, and it's gonna feel a little bit different than you're used to. So,
Right.
um, it's really I do have a lot of guitars, but it's really important to me to, like, have as many different types of guitars as possible, just because, they feel differently and they make me play differently.
Mm-hmm. I'm gonna say like you've probably the amount that you have, you're probably always inspired because you're picking up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's the thing about guitars. I feel like. What's your thought? Have you played any exotic strats?
Briefly at the NAMM show.
Okay, because I'm a Sir guy. I have a couple of them, and I
Mhm.
love them. And then I'm really interested in trying to check out an exotic strat. just because I've heard they have more of like the vintage feel to
Yeah.
them, comparatively speaking. Like, did you get that vibe like between like a Sir and an exotic?
Yeah, like I owned a Sir HSS a while ago, and I remember it feeling really, really modern and kind of too comfortable, like too
Mm.
perfect. Which I don't know if you get that with your Sir, but um, that's the thing. It's like I almost like guitars that make me work a little
Mm.
more. Um,
I like fighting
so
the guitar too. Like
yeah, so
I
I
want a
like a
little
little.
fight.
Yeah, exactly. Not
Mm.
that's not to say I have like buttery playing guitars like the PRS stuff and the NAG stuff. It's just like so easy to play, and but I like to offset that with guitars with higher action and not necessarily the best intonation and whatnot. So
Man, the Sir Telly I have
mhm.
is I don't know what it is about that guitar. I bought it used on Reverb, and I play C standard. I have it tuned to C standard. And it just is magical. It just
Yeah,
has I don't know what it is about it. It's just I'll never sell that guitar just because there's something no matter what tuning it's in because it used to be in standard, but it just resonates really well no matter what amp I throw in front of or what pedal I plug in, if it's a crazy fuzz pedal or whatever it is, it takes it and it loves it. And the thing about the Sir stuff, from what I've found at least, because I've been a Strat guy my whole life. Um, the first one I played was in the Mesa Boogie store in Hollywood,
hmm
and it freaked me out, man. Like I had just sold a guitar, I had a bunch of money in my pocket, I was ready to get something, and when I picked it up off of the rack, I was like, "Oh, I've heard of that company. I'll try it." And it felt so like someone measured my hand, and it was just like while I was
wow,
sleeping. And so that's the thing. That's why I have 3 of them now because it just works for me. And I guess that's the thing is like I've talked to other people about this on the show too, but sometimes the guitar will find you too.
yeah.
It's weird, but anyway, I wanted to ask you. I just saw your clown video, so I'm gonna have a joke about that
Mm,
later in the. But the because I had one of those and I sold it like I bought it for $300 in 2002 and I sold it for $1,500
Wow,
in like I don't know 2014, and that's when I bought my first Sir. So I
nice.
was like, that turned into a guitar, which is cool.
Hey, that's cool.
Is there any with all the inundation you have of gear, is there anything that just is like, bam, blown your mind recently that you would wanna, like, chat about? Because 'Cause I'm so curious because you probably get so much stuff in the mail, but is there anything that
Um,
lit your fire?
that's a good question. There's so many pedals that are like in different places of my studio. Well, I'll tell you one thing. It's not a new thing, but this is something I'm like totally obsessed about.
Mhm.
I don't know if you're hip to this or any of you guys are hip to this, but I just filmed a video that's coming out next week. But this the Schultz Rockman headphone amp
Hmm.
is one of the greatest guitar tones ever, and
Nice.
that's all I'm going to say about it. You can like look up all the info on it or whatever, but this is the sleeper sound for me, and
Wow.
I own 2 of them.
Okay. Alright. What about so the recent pedal purchase that I've gotten that's totally rocked my world is the Gladio.
Yeah,
That that thing is so good, man.
yeah, that
And
sounds killer.
there's so many overdrive pedals, obviously, you know that, I don't need to tell you that. But what is your if you had to go to a gig and you had to take 1 guitar,
Mhm.
1 overdrive pedal, and an amp, what would that combo be?
One guitar, well, it depends on the gig. Well, if I didn't even know what I was playing and I just wanted a guitar that I knew I could do the whole gig with comfortably, man, that's a good question. I would probably say right now, and I go through phases with my gear. I'm really liking my Nags Kenai Doug Rappaport model, which is kinda
Okay.
like a Les Paul style guitar, but I had changed out the neck pickup to originally it came with a Duncan Jazz, but I replaced it with a Slash pickup,
Mm.
Slash signature pickup, And for some reason, so the bridge pickup is a Duncan Custom 78, which is supposed to be like Eddie Van Halen's first pickup or whatever. And then this slash pickup, and the combination of those, like, is perfect. It's really nice and it sings really well.
Okay.
So I'd probably take that. Overdrive pedal, it's got to be my Mythos Susmariosip, just because I designed it to be my one grab and go pedal for my sound.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're not familiar, it's a boost, Herculean overdrive, and then a slap echo,
I've been
which
wanting
you
to
can
try
tweak.
it.
Yeah,
Trust me. I even talked to Zach when he was on here. I was like, that slapback sounds so damn good.
it's simple. It's just like you just got to dial it in right, so perfectly, so you hear it, but you don't hear it.
Mm-hmm.
You don't notice it or whatever.
Okay.
So, and
So
then
we got
amp
pedal.
wise,
Mm-hmm.
that's a good one. Like my favorite amp right now is my Amplified Nation Steel String Sultan, which
Mm-hmm.
is like a steel string singer, but it's like 20 watts. Um, and it's just clean. It's like the perfect clean, but it takes pedals really well. So, um, it's just a good amp.
Sounds like a good three-piece there.
Yeah.
Did you have any how many amps do you have right now? Like how
It's
many amps do
funny.
you
Amps is I've got quite a few, but I don't use a lot of them. I've got on my amp shelf in the main studio, I've got 4 hooked up to a switcher that I can, go between, but then I've got like another 3 alternates there, and then I've got stuff in the back. Let's say I got about 12.
Okay. That's reasonable.
I don't know.
I don't see anything wrong with that.
It's weird. I don't have like, because of the work that I do, I don't have a need for a lot of amps. Like I don't have a need to switch out a bunch of amp things. Like I'm not a heavy studio session guy. I have basically 2 or 3 amps that are my go-tos, and that's all I use for the
Mhm.
most part. So I feel like I don't have a ton of amps. I got a metric ton of pedals and quite a few guitars.
Okay. And we were talking right before this about when I was telling you I'm just like bamboozled by delay pedals.
Yeah.
Like I'm not even kidding, man. I've probably owned 6 delay pedals and I've sold them every time. And
Really?
I don't know why I keep doing it to myself. Like I keep wanting delay, but I don't find myself using it. And I just sold that Walrus D1, which Terry's in here. We both have it and we both love it. And I'm sure he still has it, but I'm like, dude, I just can't. I don't use whoops, sorry. I don't use MIDI. So
Yeah.
I have no reason to do that. I never find myself in a situation where I need like a long delay or anything. I just want a slapback. And that's probably why I like your pedal, because it's
There you
so
go.
simple. You know what I mean? But
Well,
it's
I mean, if that's all you need, then you could just get a basic analog delay and duck it in after your overdrive, and that's it.
yeah.
But yeah, I totally hear you on that. It's like I never really. I mean, I started using delays in college, and it was more just for like an ambient thing, ambience,
Mm,
not like a huge, super long delay type of ambience. More like almost like a reverb type of effect where it gives it more space.
right.
And that was something that I actually noticed on an Allman Brothers record. So
Really?
there was this, and I'm not positive, but I feel like um, there was a live Allman Brothers record with Warren Haynes, and there was when he kicked on the solo for Blue Sky. I forget the name of the album. It was like live at the whatever Fillmore or something.
I wish that was the name of the album. That'd be
Live
fantastic.
at whatever.
Somebody
But
should look it up.
I could have sworn like when he kicked on his solo sound that there was a very little bit of delay acting as almost like a reverb sound. And I liked that because it kind of created a little bit of space, but not like so much. You couldn't really, like I said, you couldn't really tell it was there unless you really listened for it.
Yeah.
So I used delay like that. I never used it for like, crazy ping pongy stuff or whatever. I only used it, the mix was way down, so you only get a little bit of repeat coming through. So
Mhm.
that's how I use delay for the most part. And to be honest, it's either that way or my slap delay, and that's it. I don't do a lot of swelly stuff unless I have to
Mhm.
for a gig or a session or something.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because like, I really wanna like it. That's the problem. I wanna like it, and when I put the Flint on for reverb,
Mhm.
that thing just sounds so good. I'm like, "I don't need
You don't
delay."
need it, yeah.
Yeah, it's just so good. Um, so last thing I was gonna ask you about, so this whole, 80s chorus tone thing that you went down a couple
Yeah.
weeks ago. So, I found that very that was it?
No, this is another option,
Oh, okay,
this
okay.
is you'll see it in my video.
Okay, okay. No spoilers. I found that really interesting because as a, similar age dude growing up and like being in the backseat of my parents' car listening to B104 in Baltimore, every song was laden with that
Yeah.
sound. And it just grained on me, man. Like I never really dug it. And then I think like as the older I get, and when you hear like old Landau stuff like you were talking about, and like, oh, I see the value in this now. Cause there was an era. It was an era, of tone, if you will. But a lot of that stuff, like I think the things that I heard at Berkeley, like old Mike Stern stuff, and just like, that jazz fusion tone.
Yeah.
Oh, I just
Well, yeah.
couldn't get behind it. But, which is why I gravitate to like Wayne Krantz
Oh,
and
yeah.
players like that. But so was that like a fun journey to go down? Because you'd seem like you were like, I hated it, but now I love it.
Yeah, cause well, I made the video after I started going down the rabbit hole because I was like, "This is awesome." And, I think about how the heck did I get into it, and, like, I feel like at the time, you heard these songs on the radio, and they were cheesy songs, and the guitar was cheesy and whatever, but then, especially when you're a guitar player and when you're a musician and you discover, like, oh, it was played by this musician that's actually a really burning, rock, blues, jazz, fusion player or whatever that has his own thing. And you kind of start having more respect for the work, that Landau and Huff and Lukather did, 'cause
Mhm,
knowing that they're actually these like, I don't want to say schooled, but like these really intense musicians that were just getting hired to do these pop sessions because that was the work and whatnot. And then
mhm.
at night, they would go to the baked potato and play Fusion Links or whatever.
It's so great. I mean, it made me like, because that seems like a choice, Now maybe it was the artist saying like, we want to capture that sound. That's the sound, man. Like right now, that's like what's
Yeah.
going on. That's what's hip. But like it's also a choice. They had to bow to the artist and do what they wanted to do on the record. But like it's such an interesting period of music, guitar wise,
Mhm.
because the dichotomy of like hair metal and then like that
Yeah.
is just like, and that's when you look back and look through and all those cats are like kind of jazz players. You know what I mean? Like when you
Yeah.
really think about it, it's really an interesting period of guitar. And what I like about what's going on right now with people like you and Rhett and all these people are doing all this great stuff and great content is this is like, in my opinion, man, I say this all the time, but I think this is like the platinum era of guitar because we have so many choices in terms of the types of, now it's not just Gibson and Fender. Now it's all these other great companies that are building like beautiful artful guitars.
Yeah.
And like all the gear that we have at our disposal in terms of like creating new sounds and pushing the envelope further. I'm never going to be Eddie Van Halen in that sense, but like figuring out new ways to use stuff to be interesting. It's just like all that crazy stuff that Maris makes, and do
Mhm.
you know what I mean? It's just like I think it's the platinum era
It
of
yeah,
our
it's
yeah.
kinda like the Renaissance. It's because you have all these independent builders, independent musicians that are, you know, coming up and getting known. and influencing other people and inspiring other people. So, especially with like the pedal scene, there's never been more pedals than right now. It's like there's so many, people just in their basement or the garage building these amazing pedals, and um it's hard to keep up with.
I'm sure,
Whereas like
especially
in
for
the
you.
80s and 90s, it's like, if you didn't have a digital stereo rack, you couldn't be a company or something.
That's so great.
Or
Is
if you
there
couldn't build one of these.
Man, that thing's gonna blow up now. As soon as that video comes out, man, you
I'm
watch.
afraid.
Oh man. What's your really quick before we do the lightning round get down? What's your favorite fuzz pedal right now?
I've been digging two. My main go-to fuzz pedals have been the Kingtone Germanium fuzz, and then I also have a Analog Man Sunface NKT
Okay.
Red Dot.
Ooh, look at you. They're both
Yes.
germanium, right?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
And they both
Yeah.
sound totally different and react totally different, but they still have that fuzz facey vibe, which I really like.
Yeah.
I did a big shootout with Brett Papa.
I missed that. I should go check it out
I
today.
think it's actually a two-parter. One video is on my channel and one video is on his channel.
Oh, okay. That's probably why I missed it.
We
My
had a
buddy
lot.
just let me borrow the Vemurim Myriad fuzz.
Mm-hmm.
That thing is
Is that
loud.
Josh's?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it is loud AF, bro. It is so loud. Like the level, if you barely crack that sucker open, and I know like that's the thing about Josh Smith is he likes that headroom.
Yeah. He likes to
But
play loud.
dude, have you played through that thing?
No, I just seen him play at the NAMM show and live and stuff.
It's wicked. But I mean, when I was kind of putting it up against Jesse's Silicon Fuzz, I was like, I mean, they kind of both do the same thing. But man, if you want headroom and fuzz for days,
Yeah.
that thing
Wow.
is, that's a slayer. All right, you ready for
Nice.
this lightning round get down?
Okay, let me get a sip of my coconut water.
Do it
Brought to
up.
you
We're
by
going to
Whole
start.
Foods.
So we got a little bit of a metronome for some suspense. And we're going to kick it off. So the first question, 100% of the time, is always the same.
Okay.
And you can go into details why you chose those answers if you want, because there's no time limit, or you can
All
just
right.
rattle them off, whatever you want to do. Lennon or McCartney?
Oh God. McCartney.
Okay. Super Mario Brothers or Legend of Zelda?
Wow. We're talking about original NES.
NES, man.
I probably spent more time on Zelda.
Okay. Clint Eastwood or Chuck Norris?
Chuck Norris.
Open or closed back cabinet?
Can I say half
Sure.
closed?
Sure. Dracula or Frankenstein, since we got Halloween coming up.
Dracula.
Okay, cool. Now here's one. Would you rather have perfect pitch or perfect sight reading skills? Like you read it immediately when it's put in front of you.
Perfect pitch.
Okay. Guitar player or Guitar World?
Guitar player.
Vintage or a brand new amp?
Right now probably a vintage amp.
What would
I
you
don't have
go
a
with?
lot of those. Some kind of like a Fender, like Harvard, one of those small Tweedy amps.
Okay, I can get behind that. Gremlins or Beetlejuice?
Oh man, I have to say Gremlins because when I was a kid, that was my movie. I even had like a stuffed, what's his
Gizmo?
name? Gizmo. Yeah, he was like my teddy bear.
Nice. All right, last one. Sometimes it's the hardest. Sometimes it's the easiest. Clon or clone?
Probably a clone. Only because I've played some good clones and they're right on par. Which I do have a video coming out on that as well.
Oh, we will keep our eyes peeled, my friend. You made it through, so congratulations on that. unscathed.
Awesome.
So what is your favorite clone right now? Because I'll tell you what, man, the reason I was okay with selling my clone and getting
Mhm.
$1,500 is because that Wampler Tumnus is so good
Yeah. I
that
never
I
got
was
to
like, it's
I
good.
never got to play the Wampler Tumnus. I got the Tumnus Deluxe. So I didn't
Mhm.
really know what and plus I didn't really know what the clon sound was at that time. But I did film a couple shootout videos with the clon, which will come out shortly. I don't know, in a couple weeks. Um, and one of the pedals that I really actually, I don't want to give too much away. So one
Yeah,
of
yeah,
the
you don't
pedals
have to.
that I really liked was the Mythos Wildwood Mjolnir, which
Yeah.
so he has two different ones, the standard one and then the Wildwood one. And I actually I had the original Mjolnir, and then he let me borrow the Wildwood version, and I liked that, and that was pretty close to his silver clone that he let me borrow.
Okay. Yeah, I was thinking about I have the gold Mjolnir, and I was thinking about getting the wild one because
Yeah.
I know they're different flavors a little bit.
Yeah, to me, it was a little sweeter, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, for sure. I can see that. Cool. All right, RJ. Well, thanks again, man. I really appreciate you spending some time with me on a Wednesday evening.
Yeah, thanks
Um,
for having me.
of course, man. Everybody, just so you know, this Saturday, the journey continues at home. I'm gonna have Jono Ricks from the Wood Brothers is gonna be on.
I
Do you
went
know
to
those
college with
cats?
him. Yeah.
You did?
I introduced him to his wife.
Oh my god, man. You should call
We're
me
like
should stop
really
in
good
and say
friends.
hi.
Yeah,
Um, the Wood Brothers are probably in my
they're
top 3
great.
favorite bands. I mean,
Yeah,
my wife was like, "I can't believe you're putting stickers on your car." I have 2 stickers, 2 band stickers on my truck. Pearl Jam and the Wood
Wood Brothers.
Brothers.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was so cool. I was so happy when he got to play with that, started playing with them, and was actually in a band, and
Man.
that's just another hired gun. So
Did you see him playing with Gabe Dixon, like, in the
yeah.
beginning, I'm sure?
So
Yeah.
we all went to college together in Miami. So
Okay. I
um,
my daughter really wants me to get Gabe on this because she loves his music.
get him.
Dude, I've tried to email him, and he's just not getting back, and I'm just
Yeah,
like,
sometimes he's hard to get a hold of.
yeah,
I mean, I haven't. It's funny. We all live in Nashville, but we never see each other.
yeah.
I think the last time I saw Gabe was a couple years ago at it was like a Beatles tribute concert or something at City Winery here, and he's a great singer. He's a great guy.
Oh, man, he seems like it. I did my daughter the other night when we were eating dinner and was like, "Hey, daddy, can you do the lightning round thing with me?" And I was like, "Okay." So I put my metronome and I was on Taylor Swift or Gabe Dixon. And she was like, "Gabe Dixon." And I was
That's
like,
awesome.
"Yes."
That's so cool.
Yeah, man. Well, thanks again, buddy. See you guys Saturday. Have a great rest of your week.
Thank you.
All